İşte yavru alayım mı seni? Bana geçeriz ya, sıkıntı yok. Canım hiç öpmeyeyim ya.
This is Heijan. The clip you're watching through this stock footage of an old TV comes from his 2017 hit Yansın Geceler. The music video of Yansın Geceler has close to 250 million views on YouTube, and Heijan himself gets over 1 million listeners a month on Spotify. He's a successful rapper, and he started from this. Now, take a good look at this video because the stuff we'll talk about today is hidden all over the background. Because today, we're going to talk about the hidden Istanbul. Now, when you hear the name Istanbul, you'll most likely think of this, or maybe this. Istanbul is one of the most beautiful cities in the world and has been for the better part of the millennium. It's the urban personification of the double-headed eagle. One set of eyes looking to the east, the other set looking towards the west. Hemingway lived here. Agatha Christie finished Murder on the Orient Express here. Napoleon once claimed if the world was one country, Istanbul would be its capital. The city's been called many things in its lifetime, born Byzantium, rechristened Constantinople, before ending up as Istanbul. Vikings called it Miklagard, the big city. Turkish people in the Republican times, though, they came up with another name for it. Taşı toprağı altın şehir. That translates into the city with golden stones and soil. This is a semi-poetic way of trying to say Istanbul will make you rich. In 1923, Turkish Republic declared itself ally with their capital as Ankara, a city that had only been used as a trade route pit stop for the past couple of centuries. This was both symbolic and also necessary because Istanbul was occupied and geographically very vulnerable to outside attack. It also housed the Ottoman royal family, whose influence pervaded the city, so dropping the city as the capital also translated into dropping the Ottoman royal family easier. Here's the thing though, moving the capital from Istanbul to Ankara did not magically transform Istanbul from a meeting point between two cities and two continents into just another city. Istanbul remained as the financial and commercial heart of the country and the region, as the war-weary people of Anatolian Western Thrace tried to rebuild their lives in the unwanted and underdeveloped remains of the Ottoman Empire, so they slowly started to flock to the city of Constantine, finding themselves alongside ethnic Turks that were being relocated from other parts of the late Ottoman Empire. So soon enough, the city grew from the 700 or so thousand people it had in 1927 into 1 million in the 50s, 2 million in the 70s, 8 million in the 90s, and into the 15 million it supposedly houses today. The reason for Istanbul's drastic rise in population was, as we've discussed, its golden stones and soil. People who lived in simple, unappealing conditions, particularly in the eastern parts of the country, found Istanbul quite attractive. Neither resident nor commercial infrastructure was developed all that much in most of the east, well into the 1980s and even the 90s, and feudal practices held on for decades. This wasn't just an eastern thing as well. Istanbul was just richer and offered more opportunities than any other city or region in Turkey. So people just up and moved there. And they found themselves stuck in a cultural limbo between the rural conservative conditions they grew up in and the urban liberal conditions they've encountered in the city. As Istanbul grew up and across the landscape, different pockets of localities emerged until there was at least 5 different cities. I'll tell you what I mean. Most of these immigrants ended up building working or lower middle class lives for themselves in the suburban regions of Istanbul, away from traditionally Istanbul places like Nişantaşı or Beyoğlu where the old guard lived. They ended up at the then newly developing places like Gazi Osman Paşa and Bahçelievler and of course Bağcılar. So those places started to look a lot different than what was considered traditionally Istanbul. But they were still Istanbul, meaning they could still witness Istanbul and its golden stones and its golden soil. They were just closer now. So let's go back to Heijan. Heijan is the second generation domestic immigrant. His parents relocated from Van to Istanbul when he was a kid, and he spent a good chunk of his life in Bağcılar, which this very song is about. Heijan, in this pre-fame underground video of his, talks about day-to-day life in the district. The whole song, being very funny at most times, is actually a very important record of that part of Istanbul that visitors and tourists never go to. For example, take a listen to this verse.
İstanbul size göre cennet mi bir de bize sorun nasıl bir cehennem. Düştün mü tutan yok inan bana. Kaybolursun çıkmaz bir sokakta.
Heijan, being Kurdish and living in the hidden Istanbul, actually talks about this stuff a lot in his songs. Do you remember the big hit, the one I showed you at the beginning of the video? That whole song is a send-up of the rich Istanbul boys who Heijan thinks run the city, with, for example, lyrics like
Yediği, aynı hamburger, patatesi. Araba lazım, Florya'da galerisi. Babası mühendis oldu kız delisi. İnşaatta mala vurur bizim gibi amelesi.
I'm sure you get the general picture. Heijan, from his vantage point situated in the underbelly of Miklagard, looks up at the city boys and finds them shallow and ungrateful. There's that guy for whom Heijan is merely an amele and a peon or an unskilled worker. That guy eats hamburgers all day and writes cards from his daddy's gallery in Florya'da and chases girls all over town as people like Heijan labor in hard conditions. Now, Heijan, to the best of my knowledge, is the first guy who voiced this point of view from this vantage point in popular Turkish culture, but I'm 100% positive he wasn't the first guy to feel like this. In Istanbul specifically, but largely apparent in other cities as well, many first or second generation domestic migrants grew up with a grudge against the well-to-do, urbane and educated middle-class people. They thought of them as drinking wine and eating hamburgers and looking down on the dirty peasant folk who polluted the city, which was partly true. I mean, nobody drinks wine all that much in Turkey, and quite frankly, everyone eats hamburgers a normal amount, unlike what Heijan is imagining, but the middle and upper classes in Istanbul did look down on people like Heijan for the longest time. All the kids who had migrant families and grew up in the hidden parts of Istanbul were judged to one degree or another, perhaps because of the accent they couldn't lose, or due to their rural-scented lifestyles, which usually included a then unfashionable outward devotion of Islamic faith. So as one of those kids with migrant families, Heijan put his frustrations with the shiny people and their perceived immorality into his music. There was another one who grew up as a kid with a migrant family, and that dude, well, if you know, you know. Because for both now and the future, keep in mind, when talking about anything even slightly related to the Republic of Turkey and Turkish culture in general, the current of the conflict that runs underneath it all is always East versus West. Everything else is just topical dressing. The double-headed eagle is alive and well, and I'll see you next time.